Catherine Gunn's story is that in 2003 she was working as a translator at GCHQ. She received a memo from the NSA, which is sort of the American counterpart of GCHQ, asking for help in obtaining any and all information on members of the UN Security Council so that they could essentially blackmail them into voting for the war in Iraq. She exposed that memo, she leaked it, and the story is sort of about the repercussions of that. I got the script and I didn't remember it at all. I mean, I think because thinking back, I think I was in the States. So it didn't, as it sort of says in the film, there was a kind of news blackout on it in the States. So I don't remember it, but I think I was so interested because obviously as a period of history now, it's impacted on today so much. We're still living with the repercussions of that moment. She acted out of conscience. I think that the story is almost about a loss of her innocence because, she sees something that she believes is wrong. She sees something that she believes, and was right in believing, that would cost now millions of lives. And she thought that she could put it right. She thought that there was an illegal act, that she would be able to expose it, and that would be an end to it. And isn't it horrific that that's not the way the world works? So, I thought it was, as much as being a super dramatic, fascinating moment in history, I also thought, it's very universal in the moment that we all grow up and the moment that you realise that right and wrong, that there's a very difficult, tricky grey area in between. Catherine's story was actually very much on her own. She was making these decisions at work, but not talking to people about it. And then obviously the repercussions to her family life as well. But I sort of found that fascinating, that essentially you have a story about Catherine Gunn, and yet the Martin Bright and the kind of news media angle of it is sort of one of the most dramatic components. What makes the story so interesting is that people very much see it from two sides. You either have the people that go, absolutely, there was illegal activity on behalf of the American, the British governments, and she absolutely should have exposed it. It potentially could have saved millions of lives. And then you've got the other side of the argument, which is she was a member of the intelligence community. She had signed the Official Secrets Act. You do not leak anything outside of that community. You have refugee crises, you have the politics in this country, you have the politics in America that have been so completely changed by this period, So I think for anyone who's lived through this and remembers 2003 so clearly, it's the big thing in all of our lives that has impacted so much on the world that we live in today. And so, you think back to that and you think everything looked different, and now obviously we have a lot of knowledge about exactly what happened then and the repercussions of that, but obviously at the time nobody did. It was amazing when Rafe said that he'd play Ben Emerson, because Ben Emerson is an incredibly important character within the film, but it's a very small part. And you sort of needed somebody like Rafe to say yes, to show how important that character is, even though it's not a film that's following his story. Generally, in talking about the cast in this film, it's an extraordinary group of actors, and even the people that were coming in for maybe 3 lines were exceptional. We were so lucky to get the people who agreed to do this film in it. It's a really amazing cast. It's been made with a lot of love, and I think that's because a lot of people just felt like it was an important story to tell and to be a part of. It's an integral part of history, of modern day history, and I think we all felt like it was a story that needed to be remembered, because I didn't, and talking to everybody else, nobody else remembered it either. So I think it just felt like it needed to have its place in the history books. I loved working with Gavin. He's first and foremost just one of the nicest men you could possibly imagine, which is quite rare for a director. He also, I mean, he has this. I've never seen the amount of energy that one person has. If he could possibly play all the parts and just make the entire thing himself and do the hair and makeup and do the costumes, he would if he possibly could. He can't, but he gives it a good go. I mean, I think, you know, you look at his resume and you just know that he lives in that world. He lives in a very politically charged world. You know, he's fascinated with it. He's fascinated with the morality of it. He has a history he was a lawyer, and he was also in the army, so he has an integral knowledge of all of these things, and he believes in the story absolutely, and he's not frightened of the story. I think it's a story about conscience. I think it's a story about morality. I think it's a story about, you know, it asks very serious questions about it looks like there isn't a place for people of conscience to be in our intelligence services. Are we okay with that? It looks like there isn't a place for, if there has been illegality within a government, there is no way that people in our intelligence services can make that public without potentially going to prison. Are we okay with that? If our governments have broken the law, it seems to be with the Official Secrets Act and now the Snoopers Charter that they're trying to bring in, that they are indeed above the law. Are we okay with that? You know, I mean, I think this is a film that really asks us as citizens of a country to question the morality of our governments and the actions that are given in our name. And I think that's a very powerful discussion to have with a piece of work. Whichever side of this argument you come out on, you know, I think that these are things that as the British public, as the American public, as any member of the public in any country, we really have to question what we're comfortable with the powers that our governments have.